presentation on connections and relationships with elders from the First Nations, salmon in our culture, an inherent right to self-determination. Before we begin, I would like to give thanks to the Sharing Our Knowledge Planning Committee for organizing this conference. Goodness sheesh. My name is Christy Jameson. My sister and I, Tis Peterman, are both from the Kashadi clan. My name is Daskawa. Tis's name is Queek. We, along with Cindy DeWitt, Mita DeWitt, Kendry Caesar, and Jocelyn Estes, are the descendants of the last proclaimed Chief Shakes the Seventh, Charlie Jones. I would like to recognize our Southeast Alaska Indigenous Transboundary Commission, better known as SEITC, Executive Committee, board members, and staff. Please stand up when I call your name. Rob Sanderson Jr., Chair and President. Esther Ashton, Vice Chair, excuse me. Sylvia Banning, Secretary. Guy Archibald, Executive Director. Bob Sam, Director, Sitka Tribes of Alaska. Tis Peterman, Special Projects. And I'm the new Assistant Executive Director. Now please help me give a warm welcome to Guujaaw, Hereditary Chief of Haida Gwaii, in Kirby, Muldoe, Tsimsian, and Gitxsan descent.
Simgaget. Simgaget. Sigidam Hanak. Talkabawelsa. Hapwalak Sadi. Wilks we get. Gitxsan Diwai. Wilks we get. Amasa, Sun, Chiefs, women chiefs, women who are held in high esteem. It is an honor for us to be here tonight. My English name is Hapwalaksa, or Kirby Muldoe, sorry. I'm nervous. My ancestral name, which comes from the Gitxsan people on the Skeena River, is Hapwalaksa. I come from the house of a night drummer. Our crest is the grouse that drums its chest. When you hear a grouse drumming its chest at night, that's who I am. My clan is the fireweed. It's a wonderful evening to be here. And Gidansda, Guujaaw, and I look forward to speaking to you and speaking with you. This presentation is going to be very informal. As you can tell, we haven't written anything down. Everything we talk about, we've learned in our lifetimes. And we've come here to share it with you. And we are honored to do that. Gidansda, High Chief from the Haida, Guujaaw, from the Haida people. We've come a long way to be here with you tonight, and we were stuck in transit for 2 days, but we didn't want to turn around. We wanted to be here. I'll let Guujaaw introduce himself.
No, you did. Yeah, we're humbled, honored. No, he's not humbled. I'm humbled. To be here, welcomed into Tlingit country, and good to meet relatives here as well. And what we're going to do is fairly broad topics, and the theme is of peace, and that's really important. They're really important that when opportunities in times of peace come, that we do take advantage of it and use it for our own growth. But with permission of the hostesses, I'd like to sing a song to start, just to make me less
attractive.
So this is it is a war song, but it's not about war. It's about looking inwards, about what you are, who you are, and what's at stake. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't work, but I'll try it. Oh, hiya, hiya, wala, hiya, we, ayo, ayo, yeah, ahola, ayo, ayo, yeah, ayo, wala, ayo, wala, ayo, we, hiya, ayo, wala, hey, So, in a way, I want to go to the origins of our people, and I'll not make it the whole story, but the short story of it. Our story isn't of coming across the Bering Sea or coming out of trees and losing our tails, but it is a story of coming out of the ocean through the supernatural beings, the ravens coming from Skulujuk, who's foam woman, and the eagles coming from Tilaquans. And in our stories, we know about a time when all that water between our island and the mainland was dry land, and our people lived there, and there was no trees. And so our people, eventually there was a flood and that water filled in. But our people evolved and changed through different tide changes. Plants changed. We didn't have cedar to build canoes for a long time. And all of that was myth until the scientists said, oh, geez, during the Ice Age, the weight of the ice pushed down that land, and that Hecate Strait was dry and inhabitable land, in fact, a corridor. And so all the people would have mingled at that time, because there was hardly any place that we could have gone inland very far. And so, once that land was separated by waters, and that's more than 10,000 years ago, our language evolved into an isolate language. So it has little to do with our neighboring people, except in later years, like the grizzly bear, and we say hoots, like you do, because we don't have grizzly bears there, but we have the crest, which we've taken from here. And a lot of things become in common between the people along the coastline. If you go all the way to the north end of Vancouver Island, there's a unique kind of thing that happens, and up the Skeena, and that's where people use coppers. They use the sea lion whisker, jitki, and feathers and all these things were from our people interacting and borrowing from each other, learning from each other. And so the fashions moved and everything became part of all of us. But those cultures, every one of them, our culture, is not about, the art in itself. It's about our relationship to the earth, the land that we live on, and it's reflected in our arts. So the arts is kind of celebrating that relationship to the land. And so with us, like everybody along that same region and all across the continent, they did everything they can to try to take away the language, the culture. And in fact, they did everything they could to spoil that earth that makes us what we are. And all the time, our people were, we're the first ones to feel the effect of a salmon creek getting spoiled, or them fishing out, the one species after another. So with their scientific methods, they go, and everything that they manage, they seem to destroy it. Here's some examples. Well, you got, the forestry and the fisheries, and they don't work together. They're just two separate things. If they're logging, the immediate dollar weighs in favor of the logging, so they'll blast through a creek and in fact, take gravel, even spawning gravels out, but they don't put them together. Like simple thing like that. That the trees, of course, regulate the water that makes the creek, that is where the salmon are born, and that's where they die, up in the forest. But they don't put that together. And to conserve, what they do is they'll say, okay, now you can catch spring salmon or king salmon, as you put it here. And so they're throwing the coho overboard because they can't retain them. And then they would switch. Now they could keep the spring salmon, but they can't keep the coho. So they, will only do one thing at a time and waste all of the rest. So everywhere, it's not just amongst us, but all over the world, this is happening, that great effort to plunder the earth, which, however you look at it, is wrong. It's not right. It's not right for us to do it either. We have rights, but our rights don't include spoiling the earth. In fact, our responsibilities are to look after this thing. And for years, we're the only ones feeling those effects, but now everybody feels it. And they're saying, oh, well, okay, well, you guys lead and we'll follow. I mean, Christ, we're, got things to do like everybody else does, and everything that we're doing to fight for the earth is about all we have. We're not rich, we don't have the kind of resources that they have, and yet they're telling us to lead this thing. The world is being spoiled by this, what is it, just, I don't know if it's greed, stupid, what is it, I don't know why they did it. And all of these things aren't ever looked at as one thing. And so we've allied, most of the coastal people allied, and we managed to protect on the land between Vancouver Island and Prince Rupert, you know, about half the landscape, and on Haida Gwaii we protected about half the landscape in its natural way, as it ought to be, as it, you know, like as it's meant to be. But, you know, when you see the climate change, you realize that no, it's not just a matter of saving a little bit of our land, because if the whole world's buggered up, you know, we could burn up as well as anybody else. There's a lot of fires in the Yukon, and there's fires up north of here, and it's, you know, like hot. And so what was I driving at? So, you know, and we did start working with the Alliance up here, but it's going to take a heck of a lot more than that. With all that's happening, you don't see much change in the way that they behave. They're still doing the same thing. The only way I could think of what's happened to humanity is that they've lost touch with nature. So they don't know what's true anymore, what's false, what's, you know, they got the internet and it's giving them garbage, and they'll believe what they're hearing, and you know, somebody says, no, there's no global warming, there's no problem, keep pumping the oil. They believe it, you know, because they have no, you know, like nature is pure truth, and people have lost touch. And so they have this whole human-created world, human-created environments, and they just don't seem to care what's going on out there. So, I mean, we fought this thing for a long time, and we know that when people do stand and push back, you can have an effect. And, you know, we know that when you do that, you got to be prepared to, you know, to put in the time and do it. And it's not something that you could do if it bothers you. You know, like if you're too stressed or something, you should stay away from that fight, but support it and send money or something. But it's really, really, you know, last ditch effort now to try to turn this around. In across the border, there's so much fish this year, and the government department that's supposed to be managing it is totally at a loss. They don't know how the hell that could happen. They're used to seeing everything being depleted. But it seems that what's happening is that maybe it's a sweet spot in this warming where it's causing a lot of feed right now, but you know, there hits a point when it gets too warm again and all that stuff starts to die. Even in the Gulf of Alaska, they said the needlefish are getting smaller, skinnier, less fat. And so the dog salmon that feed out there, they're all, you know, they're basically dying out. But it's not like as if it's a luxury of taking on a fight. what else can we do? We have to, I mean, we could turn into white men, or we could, and go down in the ship, I guess, is one way we could do it, or we could take them into our ship and ram that other one and just keep fighting it, you know, like it's too much to ignore. Well, let Kirby soften things up here. I'm getting a little too heavy here.
Yeah. So, Guujaaw talked about connections and relationships. And he talked about the relationships to the land. And inextricably, we're related to the land. We're related.
That's right.
We live with the land, not off of the land. And we have to remember that. The land is a direct reflection of our health, the health of our people. The health of the salmon are a direct reflection of the health of our people. The salmon are a keystone species and very, very important to our people, to the Indigenous peoples. In the Gitxsan and the Tsimshian people, we have stories about how the salmon saved us. They came to save us when we were starving. And all we have to do is look after them. Look after the habitat. Be careful about how we walk. In our language, we say Hagwaliin, and that means walk softly. We always say that. We say Hagwaliin. So when you're walking on the land, you make sure that you walk softly. You don't destroy everything that's behind you. Guujaaw talked about rights and responsibilities. Absolutely, we have rights, but more importantly, we have responsibilities to the generations to come. I watched my grandparents when I was 9 years old stand in front of logging trucks. Logging trucks would threaten to run them over and they didn't move an inch. Loggers would threaten to shoot them. They never moved an inch. I was 9 years old. People ask me today why I do the work I do. I said, because I've seen my grandparents risk their lives for me. For my food security, for my food sovereignty. I want to talk about the difference between food security and food sovereignty. I look at food security as when a fisherman or a fisher goes and gets that food for you, or beef, or whatever it may be, vegetables. They deliver it to the store. You can afford to go and buy it. That's food security. Food sovereignty is when you have total control over your environment. 100% over the land, the air, the water, so that your natural foods will survive and be here for you and generations to come. I also want to talk about connections and relationships amongst ourselves, our people. I look up to the Haida. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I asked them one day, I said, how do you guys do it? I said, you guys are so united. And Guujaaw looks at me and he kind of smirks and he says, we fight just like everybody else, he said. We don't always get along. But when we sit across the table from industry, from government, he said, we're united. That's where we need to get. And I look up to the Haida for that. I look up to the Heiltsuk for that. The only thing government and industry have against us is division. And they'll divide you. I've seen it in families. I've seen brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers be divided by money. I'm not saying money's bad. Well, it is in some ways. I mean, you know, you gotta buy gas, you gotta buy this and that. But we have to stop the division. We have to come together and sit in rooms and work out our differences. My job is described as the Indigenous Relations Lead. And so what I do is I go around and I create and maintain relationships among Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples. And I always simplify it for people who don't get along. Think about your significant other. Do you always get along? No. Most of the time, sure. But you're not always going to get along. Do you have to make concessions? Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes you meet in the middle. Absolutely. And when you want to have a healthy relationship, that's what you need to do. I've seen it many times. Organizations that don't get along. And I encourage you to sit down with an open heart and an open mind and work out those differences. Work them out, because we're stronger when we're at peace and we're united. I've often talked about the Wet'suwet'en and the Gitxsan. My mother is Tsimsian. She's from Kitkatla, BC. My dad is Gitxsan from Kispiout. And the Wet'suwet'en and the Gitxsan went to court 24 and a half years ago. Told them to stay away. And my grandfather told me stories about when the two nations came together. They didn't agree. They didn't always agree. But they figured out a way for the two nations to move forward together. And I'll never forget it. Dalgamuk, Albert Tate at the time. My dad told me this story again. I was just a kid. But a lot of the chiefs were scared. They said, you know, how are we going to do this? What are we going to do? We've never done anything like this before. And Albert Tate said, what are you scared of? You've got the truth. Tell the truth. Talk about your culture. Talk about your language. Talk about how long you've been here. Pass down the stories. And that goes to the connection to our children and the next generation. And how important that is for us to share those stories. To share the language. To ensure that the food sources are there. Food sovereignty. Remember what I talked about? The difference between food security and food sovereignty. Food sovereignty is when you have 100% control over your food. When it's harvested. Where it's harvested. And the environment. What's happening to the rivers? What's happening to the watersheds? So I also want to, I touched a little bit on the importance of salmon. It's a keystone species. And I talked about how it's fed us for thousands of years. But I want to talk about the salmon's connection to the land. The salmon feeds everything. Everything. It feeds the water. When it dies in the water, nutrients back into the water. When a bird picks up that salmon and brings it into the trees, that salmon's feeding the tree. It's feeding the land. And so we really have to start this journey together. The people all up and down the coast that they call the Pacific. We have to stand together. We're not always going to agree, but we have to do it for future generations. We have to do it for the salmon. We have to do it for the land. We're going to have to give up some things. Absolutely. But the final goal is the most important thing.
Chief Shakes is in our stories. But not only Chief Shakes, but the Raven stories are the same stories all the way along amongst our people. Even Tall-Tan people. And, so that's the kind of stuff that we're made out of, those stories, beliefs. And a lot of things have happened in this land. We've got stories of catastrophes, tidal waves, and things like that had occurred, floods. And we survive these things, and they become, they're myth until a scientist says, oh, indeed, that happened. And so, there's lots of the stories, like there was one on, I was trying to figure out the story about the little man on the back of the raven rattles, and the one that has the land otter face, and his name was Kaka. And so that is our story, and turns out we only had part of the story, and the other parts of the story were up in your Tlingit country, and some of it was in Tsimshian country. And it was the same character that all of our people talked about, this guy and how he got his power from the landowners and was able to show people how to become closer to the spirits. So, across that imaginary border there, you probably heard the stories of finding the graves around the residential schools. And for our people, that wasn't new stories. These were stories that people have been trying to tell for a long time. And that is one of the benefits of COVID. Everybody had locked down, everybody was hypersensitive. And when that story came, it just didn't get lost in tomorrow's news because people were paying attention. Like the George Floyd thing, if there wasn't a pandemic, it probably would have got lost in the news. But these things have helped to turn, to expose this stuff. I don't know if it changes anybody or what it's going to do, but so, amongst our people, there's a lot of effort into the healing path and those sort of things. And I work with plant medicines from the Amazon and from our own plant medicines in ceremony to work with some of that. You know, not just for those purposes, but for other, just for spirit. And the old people did that. They took medicine to get closer to spirit. And what they've done to us is they've done everything to keep us away from that. They've done everything to keep us away from the land. They try to forbid us from hunting and fishing and using the land. But yet, here we are, we managed to still, we're still doing it. We're still hunting, fishing, smoking fish, and I think that if we lose that, we really lose the very core of who we are. If we lose touch with that. Those simple, basic things that are our reality. And so we could lose that in a few ways. One is as they tried and they haven't been able to stop us from hunting and fishing and trapping and all these things. But if they're successful in ruining this earth, we lose that as well. So I'm really glad for the organization that you've put together for the, you know, like not just considering boundaries, but considering that something that happens up in Tahltan country is going to certainly affect you probably more than it'll affect them if there's something goes wrong, which it does. You know, these big cruise ships, you know, it seems like, you know, just a bunch of people traveling around. Well, it is, that's what it is, you know, trying to enjoy life. But however, you know, like they're eating about 6 times a day, and they can't dump any of their waste in American waters, so they get across into Canadian waters and they let her go. Not only that, but the contaminants from scrubbing their exhaust by using the cheapest fuel, that all gets flushed out. And it doesn't matter, Canadian, American waters, it's all the ocean, that everything that we know, everything that our culture has grown from is all in danger. And so, what the hell is this crazy thing that's wrecking the earth? And why would they do that with all the smart people that they seem to have? All the sensitive people that when you talk to any one of them on their own, they're smart, they agree. Yeah, crazy that we're wrecking the world. But it's a whole system that's put into play that they can't seem to be able to undo. And so, our right to do our own thing, you know, they couldn't stop us from fishing, you know, like in the courts, they couldn't stop. They couldn't stop us from hunting. They couldn't even stop us from selling fish. So what they did was they forbade any of the fish plants from buying from anyone who doesn't have a valid fishery license. Before that, there was other games played, like I got busted once, 27 pink salmon, you know, casting or snagging them with my kids. And so I got 2 days in jail for that. Not that I gave up easy either. I didn't give it to the fisheries, didn't let him surrender the fish, but so we got a 6 mountains and surrendered it to them. But at the same time, on the same river, the commercial fishery was open, and at the same day I got busted. They took 750,000 fish going up the same river. And so I use that irony of that in showing just how crazy it is. So when something goes wrong, you can often use it in a different way to turn, to use it to some advantage. Every time they lied, we kept track, we were happy. Okay, good. And they got to the point where they couldn't bring us to court, they couldn't do anything because all their lies, all their trickery and deceit would have been revealed. So as far as our right to look after ourselves, that's our right. And we don't have to ask somebody else for that right. It comes from our ancestors. Because of who we are. It's not just a right. I mean, we got to look after ourselves, like cousins. We can't rely on them to look after us. Christ, they wreck the land, they, hurt kids, the preachers. You think of that. The people who know about God more than anything didn't seem to believe what they're preaching. They weren't scared of God watching or a judgment day or anything like that. They abused the kids. They're mean to the kids. Kids just had a miserable existence. And so that's a weird world that we're in. But if you enjoy this fight, it's pretty good, because there's so much to fight about.
I asked Guujaaw about 7 years ago, because Guujaaw's been in this fight for decades. I said, how do you do it? And he says, learn to enjoy it. It's stressful as hell. Like he said earlier, if you can't handle it, that's okay. But for the people who can handle it, I encourage you to stand up and fight. Fight for your rights. Fight for the rights of those yet to come. And when he told me that, he told me to learn to enjoy it. It took me a while to figure out what he was saying. It's stressful as heck. Absolutely. There's a term I just learned. It's called racial battle fatigue. As Indigenous peoples, we've been battling for hundreds of years for our rights. Just to be recognized as human. To be recognized as equals. To be recognized as people who can look after our own resources, look after our future, look after our children. We always have the government coming in and deciding what's best for us. It hasn't worked. 500, 600 years, it hasn't worked. It's time for us to take back that control. We don't need their permission. I often tell people, go out and exercise your rights. We don't need the government's permission to do that. You just go and do it. I've had people say, well, should we take them to court? I said, no, absolutely not. Go out there and exercise your rights. Put the onus on the government to prove you don't have rights. If you go into the court and have to prove that you have rights, you're already behind the 8 ball. Go out there, exercise your rights. I always tell people, keep the cameras rolling. Everybody's got a phone. DFO comes up to you, start the camera. Tell them about your rights. They used to tell us, oh, you're not allowed to fish, it's out of season. I always tell them, those are your laws. Those aren't our laws. We were talking about hunting moose earlier. I remember a funny story. My grandfather, when I was a young boy, I said, we call our grandfathers Yea. I said, Yea, is moose season open yet? He says, I'll go up there and open it up anytime I want. And that's what, it hit me. And our family used to do that. We would go out and get food anytime we needed it. It's a right. But more importantly, it's a responsibility. That responsibility is what we owe to our descendants, to make sure that they can live just as well as we are, or better, on those resources. I want to talk a little bit about the inherent right to self-determination or sovereignty. Again, just do it. In Canada and in British Columbia, our federal and provincial governments signed DRIPA and they signed on to UNDRIP. And I was talking to one of the lawyers who's been working on UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, for almost 30 years. And he said, Kirby, he said, you had those rights long before Canada recognized them, long before British Columbia recognized them. Your ancestors had those rights. They're inherent. Nobody can take them away from you, and nobody can give them to you. They're yours. As soon as your heart starts beating in the womb of your mother, you have human rights. And don't let anybody take those away from you. Exercise your rights and your lefts.
I really want to congratulate the people for the beautiful new Congresswoman that you got, and for not electing Sarah Palin. And that's so much an indicator of how much is wrong with us. Like, how could it be that, like, how could that happen? That lives are so lost in that people don't know what's true anymore. I want to go a little bit back into the theme of this place is that, celebrating peace, and we are in peaceful times. We're able to do things, we're able to walk freely, we're able to speak freely. It's not the same all over the world. People are, like brown people are getting killed everywhere. And, like you can see what happens, in the Middle East, Syria gets wiped out, and Libya, and there's people, families, they just don't have a place to go, and they're trying to find something safe, and nobody wants them. But then the Ukraine war comes along, and boy, the doors are wide open for them. And I don't want to say that we're innocent of that, of racism or anything. I don't even like to say it, but, we're prejudiced in the same kind of ways. And it's, it could be, looking at, who's the greatest tribe or who's the what. But I looked into what happened a long time ago. And what got me really looking at it was there was a song was given back to our people from the people on the west coast of Vancouver Island. Beautiful song. And so I asked him, what's the story behind it? There was some people living in his grandmother's house while she was just coming to age, and they had a big ceremony for it in the potlatch, and they gave some songs over to that family. And they stayed there all that time, and he finally had a chance to give it back to us. You know, they still keep it too. But so it puzzled me, what were our people doing there, and why was it, you know, why would they be hunting there? How did that work? So I started looking deeper and deeper into that thing. Even like the wars, there wasn't really any great big wars except one at Tsimshian. But that one had good cause for it. Between two girls, one was selling halibut. A Haida girl was selling halibut, and a Tsimshian girl come and bought some. And then she came back later and said, how come my bundle was smaller than so-and-so? And so she wants her money back or her new bundle. And the girl said, I'm not selling halibut, or I'm not buying halibut, I'm selling it. So the girl throws it down, and she throws it back and nicked her and made a little bit of blood. But enough blood was shed, and it ended up just escalating and escalating. And finally, there was a big battle over that. And I asked the old guy that was telling me the story, I said, well, who won? He said, nobody won. A lot of people killed on both sides. I thought about that too, you know, like when people got on the canoe, it wasn't soldiers. It is your brothers, sisters, your cousins, your friends, you know, like it wasn't expendable people. And so they weren't going to go recklessly going out to pick a fight. Their traveling was about commerce, about adventure. There was a lot of other reasons to be out there. And so most of the stories of battles occurred after there was guns and booze, you know, but they were all little fights, but it wasn't the kind of warlike society like it portrayed. It was regulated by respect and honor and all these things that are kind of getting lost these days. There's no honorable way to behave, or, you know, like understanding between the different people about how you behave when you're going into their country. And so we're in peace, and when you're in peace, you can accomplish a lot of things. And when you have allies, and especially if you have allies out there, it makes the fight that much easier, because it still remains a fight, but it could be done again. Nobody needs to die, no bullet needs to be fired. Have a look at it's a framework of agreement, look it up, it's called Gakyaals. And if that all comes to be the way that we laid it out, without going to court, there'll be recognition of title over our whole island. You know, over these years of fighting them, we managed to protect half the landscape, but still, you know, the wealth has been going out and it's been to other people. But we don't have the right to plunder our own land. We shouldn't ever think that we have the right. We got the responsibility to look after it. And so that's the opportunity now. It's not the same in the Amazon. It's not the same in the Middle East. It's not going to be the same very long. The world is going really haywire right now. And, you know, like, it's hard to say how it's gonna be by spring. You know, like, you look at Pakistan, what's happening there right now, and look at everywhere, you know, the climate is just, nobody knows what to expect anymore. And so it's going to be a matter of what comes undone first. Is it going to be the system or is it going to be the environment? And unfortunately, the better answer is that the system is going to have to come undone, and that's going to be really, really hard. So, I don't know, unless you want to keep on going, we should see if there's any questions or
I
anything.
just wanted to say one more thing before we open the floor to questions, and we encourage questions. We want to hear from you. I just wanted to touch on the peace and unity again, just quickly. I talked earlier about the importance of relationships with the land, with each other. And as I said earlier, my job is the Indigenous lead on engagement. And so my job is to bring Indigenous organizations, nations, communities, individuals together. I've been working with TIS, SEITC for about 5 years now, and the rest of the team from SEITC. We've been working to bring SEITC up into Northwest British Columbia. A team was supposed to come at the end of July, but for reasons beyond people's control, they couldn't make it. But I still want to extend that invitation to, first of all, the Indigenous organizations. I've talked with Indigenous peoples on the Skeena, the watershed that I come from, and they want to work with other nations, but they want to build those relationships with the Indigenous peoples first. Not discounting anybody else. If you're not Indigenous, we're all in this journey together. We're all in this canoe together. But they just want to get to know those Indigenous organizations, Indigenous peoples first. Reconnect. You know, the Tahltan, your neighbors. There's Tahltan people here. There's Tahltan people in what is now known as British Columbia. Those borders divided us. Same with the Tsimshian, the Haida, the Tlingit. Those borders divided us. And we have to reconnect. We have to stand together. And we have to put our differences aside. Like I said earlier, you're not always going to get what you want. But let's do what's right for the collective, for the people, for the land, so that our descendants can enjoy it just as we have. So I'm opening that invitation to SEITC and others who would like to come and visit Tsimsian, Gitxsan territory, the Wet'suwet'en. And so now I think we'll open up the floor for any questions. That's a question here.
Yeah, my great grandmother was a full under Tsimshian for Fort Simpson. And there's small native villages in Canada, you know, Fort Simpson, parts of Canada from north of Vancouver Island, all the natives there. Do you guys still have a hard time fighting with the government for your right for fish? You have to put up all that laws and stuff, you go through this for your own personal use of hunting and stuff?
We do, but
Not really. I mean, you know, like. No, we've won those battles in court,
Okay.
but the trouble is they're still out
yeah.
destroying it. You know, like they're, you know, they got factory trawlers out there. They got, you know, that. I know they have them up here too, and if you look at the information, they like, there's one in, I forget if it's Gulf of Alaska, but 10,000 king salmon in one set that they couldn't keep. So it all goes overboard. they're catching willikins in there, herring, that they can't retain, you know, and other kinds of cod that they can't, but they're just raking it up as if there's no consequence to that, you know, like I don't know what they think crabs and other fish eat, but, you know, it's unbelievable what's still going on.
And I just said we do because we still get harassed.
Yeah, that's my point.
They still come up to our boats and say, you can't do this, but we say, oh yes, we can. And that's when the cameras are rolling, right? And we talk about our rights. You know, I was told because I have a Gitxsan status card, but my mom is Tsimsian. For years they told me that I couldn't fish in Tsimsian waters. And they harassed us for years. Until one day my uncle came down to the dock. There was 4 fisheries officers there. My uncle came down, and he's a big man, and he come down that dock, and you could see the fisheries officers just like, oh shit, here he comes. And they knew who he was, Big Chief. And he walked up to them and he said, you guys can leave now. He says, you know who these people are? He said, these are my nephews, my nieces. Their mother is Tsimshian. He said, you never bother them again. And they haven't ever since. But that's what I'm saying. You have to exercise your rights. Because they're going to harass you. Absolutely. They're going to harass you.
Yeah, they pretend to be conserving by chasing around the Indian,
Yes.
you know, while in the meantime allowing the plunder of everything.
Any more questions?
I know you talked about how when the fight, or when you can't put up the fight, that you should walk away and support in other ways. But how do you keep going after being told no so many times and being told that you can't so many times?
We just keep exercising our rights.
They can't tell us what to do.
No. They have no right to tell us what to do as Indigenous peoples. We've been here for thousands of years.
We keep winning these things. Eh? We won so many in court. We've protected a lot of land. So the gains are measurable, you know, so the fight is worthwhile. But the fight now is just changing so that it's like you can't just protect your front yard and expect everything's going to be fine when the world's getting wrecked around it. So the fight is just bigger. It's international. It's you know, it's a global fight now.
I want to say Hawa and Chiefs to both Guujaaw and Kirby. You know, here in the States, the issues are the same. The laws are different. We are watching our systems collapse around us. Up in the interior in Yukon, they can't fish. You know, they're not allowed to. And it's always what we call the subsistence users. We all hate that term, subsistence. It's our way of life. But the subsistence users are always targeted first. And you know, Guujaaw's point about catching 27 fish, and they're catching hundreds of thousands of fish is same here. The states and the Fed use the number that subsistence users use between 1% and 2% of any given resource. Yet the commercial fisheries aren't the ones that are shut down first, even though that's how it's supposed to be going. And then, you know, as Rob Sanderson always talks about and has been for like 20 years, the commercial trawlers, they throw away tens of thousands of pounds of king salmon every hour. When I grew up on Prince of Wales and Gitxsan, you could catch 60, 70 pound kings all day long every day. Now if you caught a 40-pound king, it'd be in the newspaper. You know? And I really appreciate what you said about not fighting ourselves. Like, look, we're going to fight because that's who we are, but we fight with each other. We don't put it out there for them. And you know, the them is the government, the state government, federal government. You know, we have to unite and be willing to put our pride and our egos aside to band together and fight these fights. We are literally watching our way of life diminish in front of us. Something that I'm not that old, but when I was a kid, we saw and lived and it was enriched. But now, I'm from Prince of Wales. Deer are becoming a big issue, wolves, you know, all these arguments, but it's outsiders making the arguments. It's outsiders making the decisions. I've sat on groups called Tonga Speakers Roundtable when I was one of only 2 Native people in the room. We had to hold off starting our meetings because the people who were at the table to make the decisions were flying in from California. You know? It's about time, like, I'm completely with you, Kirby. I've never in my life bought a hunting license. I've killed more deer than most of them would know about. But you know what? Every one of them went to somebody.
Yeah.
That's our rules and our law. And you're right, these seasons don't even match what our traditional knowledge tells us. We should self-regulate, and you know what? I'll buy a license when it's us issuing it. And that's what we have to stand for. We're giving our rights away every day. And we're watching other people. How many sit here and go to Alaska Airlines to get on a plane and watch thousands of fish boxes get on every day? And we don't say or do anything about it. We complain on social media. We'll do a resolution here or there. We've got to make it stop.
I was taught when I speak, I have to stand up. I heard your words today, and it really touched my heart. I heard familiar things. I serve on a Transboundary commission. I'm a new member. I wondered why there's even a boundary. I don't even think our people even recognize that boundary. My clan and my people originated on the northern part of Haida Gwaii. We migrated up here and settled. So we are connected. And we also came up on the grease trail. And that grease trail crosses the boundary. We are connected. I was invited to Haida Gwaii many years ago. I received a letter from a man named Captain Gold, who invited me down to visit the Watchman program. Quite honestly, I was a little bit nervous to go because I've never been so far south. And I was a little bit afraid of you guys as well. But I went, and the red carpet was rolled out for me. And I went to the villages, Skunwai, the hot springs, Ninstance. We're the same people. So let's remove that boundary. I wanted to bring out my tribal ID, where the government says, I can't go to your country without this. Why? You're my family. I don't need this. I should be able to just go. The other thing I heard, ka, the land order. You know, my best friends here, Louise. Ka is very powerful man. We know his story. We know that he went down to your country. We know the power of Ka. So when I heard you mention him, I knew we were connected. A deeply spiritual human being. I want all of us to come together, set aside our hard feelings, forgive each other, and learn that we are all family. My grandfather, his Tlingit name, Chana. He came from your country. So I know you are family. When our cultures come together, nobody can stop us. And yes, practice our sovereignty, go fishing, gather up all the food, take care of our ancestors. I'm just very touched to listen to you. It touches my heart deeply. And it heals me. I wasn't going to come here. But when I heard your words, Ganeshtish Awa for healing me. It's really special to be in the same room as you. We are a powerful, powerful people. We have something to offer the world. I could talk for many hours. I haven't talked for a long time. So I better stop now. Thank you.
It's really such an honor to be here. I do have a connection with this place. My father was the late Sept Bill Brady. He was Kiiqawaay from Tinahit. It's been really, it was really good to hear some of his connection to Rudolph Walton. He actually was brought here by Anna Cruz in 1924 when he was 2 years old. It was a peacemaking ceremony where he got his second name, Giindajin, never sleeps. I think it was probably one of the last peacemaking ceremonies. And beside me is Lou, and I would still call her Feller. It's been a few years, she's been married a while, 50 years, but she's still Feller. And her mother and my mother were really good friends, and our great-grandmothers were sisters from the Point House, Kiiqawaay Point House in Chief. And it's really emotional to be here and to hear your words, because we have some other, Paulette has been helping. There's some other folks that have been helping with the herring. Our Secret Tribe of Alaska has been fighting for at least a couple of decades with the equivalent of DFO, Department of Fish and Game. And Chief is the last place in all up and down the coast where we can get herring eggs on hemlock branches. And it's a lot harder, and for years we've been going to the Board of Fish for years. You know, I helped organize elders in 1997 to go. And then in 2018, I think in 1997, we had maybe 20 people testify. And it was hard to watch. It was hard to watch our elders being shut down by the Department of Fish and Game because they had to have 3 minutes to tell them why herring are important to us. As soon as that red light came on, they said, no more worries. And then in 2018, we organized more than 100 people to testify before the Board of Fish. And one of the things that you're talking about is the spirituality, and Bob, Sam, and I, we have some stories, I won't go into that for another time. But, you know, we're talking about the spirit. You know, we've done a good job, I think, in getting Western educations. We've done a good job of being able to learn Robert's Rules of Order. But it's been really hard to find that spirit. And for whatever reason, in 2016, I decided that I would ask our clan leader, Ray Wilson, if we could have a herring ku'i, a yao ku'i, and reignite that spiritual relationship that we have with the herring and to come to a better understanding of what our responsibility is on a spiritual level. How we use those spiritual laws and those human rights that we were born with. And I think that for me, you know, it gets hard, and it is hard. And yeah, there are absolutely days when I love to fight, you know. If people say the right words, you know. But there are days when I can't. I cannot go to another Board of Fish. I cannot go to a local advisory committee. And in fact, I am really working hard to be my true self. And so when people said, Louise, you have to go to the local advisory committee, I said, okay, I'll go, but I am going to speak my truth. And I said, I feel like I have to come to this table and beg and say, please, may I have some more in my own country with my own traditional food, and it doesn't feel right, and you should not have to do this. And I guess, you know, I'm really hoping that, you know, we can put aside our differences because because we do need to come together. And I remember hearing 30 years ago, I went to this gathering in Anchorage, I think it was, they had some elders there and some medicine people. They said, we're going to come on hard times, and we can choose to, you know, turn away and, you know, not take a look at what's going on, or we can use the opportunity to make some difficult decisions. And those decisions are to stand up, you know, to the Board of Fish, and are to, you know, when we're feeling like we aren't unified, to go ahead and say, you know what, we're going to have a ku'i. Please come. Please come. Be our guest. Please come and be in community. Because I think, you know, just from what little I learned from my father, Banana Stick, he was raised by Anakots, who was called one time Wolfhouse. That's why we have the clan system. That's why, you know, that's why I can stand here and understand how we are all related, why I have my, you know, my granddaughter here and my brother Bob here. And if we keep on seeing those differences, we're not looking hard enough to see the similarities. So I am so glad that you are here and really appreciate this opportunity. So from the Chief.
Yeah, how for, you know, what you're putting into it, and I want to say something, you know, not tell you what to do, but to say, maybe you're wasting your time with the advisory board. tell the National Geographic the story. Do it. Let them do it right. Give them the time instead of let them go to the elders. Let them see and tell this story. Like maybe it's a wrong approach. We don't go to any advisory of these fish advisory boards. They pretty much call the shots to the DFO, but we said no, that's not. We're dealing with either you. We're looking after our fish. That's all there is to it.
We did invite all of them to the Ku'ik. We actually planned the ceremony to be the day before testimony. And 4 of them came and stayed a while and talked with tribal citizens. And then they all went and voted against us the next day, which,
Yeah,
it is what
like,
it is.
feasting is every bit as important as prayer. Going into the land is every bit as important. We try to get our kids there, and that's what the guardians, the watchmen are doing. If we got them onto our old sites and we circulate people through, and people have a wonderful time having an opportunity to be out and on the land for an extended time.
I'm playing goodness Chief for coming here and saying something, because even as I was younger, I was probably 14, 15, 16, and I remember my dad was building a boat with my pop, and he was talking about the heron, and he was like, they were this big when I was younger, they were this big, and now they're only this big, and that's like the first time I ever saw that there was a problem. Our fish weren't growing to how big they're supposed to grow. And so that was showing a sign of the declining of our existence. And I mean, I grew up, when we were poor, we ate fish. All winter long, we ate fish. Loved it, but that's what we had. And I just want to say thank you for being here and saying something. And, well, sometimes I like to fight too, and I'm here to fight.
So you gotta, out there in the world, you gotta be rich to eat like the poor people.
I just want to say this. I appreciate you guys being here and saying something. Let me know what I can do.
Dung e andi angogan, lung an kilagan. How I'm honored by your presence, Guujaaw, and yours as well, sir. As a Haida, I have to stand and say thank you to a chief in our presence and no disrespect, but what I said after that is thank you both for your words. Your words were good, and I thank you for them, but my biggest question to you is I practice my life in such a way where I'm unapologetic about it. I go out and I do gather things. As a Haida, I don't mind doing these things. I do things with respect, but a lot of my peers, even my sisters, they feel a certain way about having responsibilities in this Western world. And they don't feel comfortable just going out and living the way of our ancestors without the idea of maybe going to jail or jeopardizing their lives. How do you think we could protect our people from such things? Like you said, put the camera on, do these things, but those things take time no matter what. We're to move forward and totally exist in this modern world, but show them how to respect everything around them so things could last longer. Growing up in Heidelberg, all I ever heard, we only gather as much as we need. We worry about the next 7 generations after us. Even when I was a little boy, my mother would tell me she would tell me not to gather so much from any one place and move around as you gather. Not only are you leaving it for those who might not have been out yet, but you're leaving it for next year for it to grow back. There's always this balance, and I've never had a hunting license or a fishing license in my life. But at the same time, how would we be able to protect our people from, being incarcerated, having to be away from their family, even for a few days? That costs money. How do we band together? In the old days, I always hear we didn't have hungry people in our tribe. In times of famine, they all band together and made it work. But we don't do that so often. In Heidelberg, where I'm from, Hikta Handlai, they do that still. We band together so nobody's hungry in our community, but you don't see it in the bigger places. You don't always see it, and you sometimes have to see people go hungry, and it breaks my heart. But how would we protect our people? So that's all I have.
I think you answered the question. You're band together. We stand together. A lot of times when we've stood up for our rights, there was 100 people there. We outnumbered the RCMP. We outnumbered the DFO. And so we stood together, and we were strategic as well. You don't always have to get arrested. There's ways of doing it so that.
No, they got no business arresting us anyway.
Good.
You know, the stats that you just read off about how many springs they're discarding because they have no business to, like they can't keep them. And you compare that, if you're in court, you show these things, this stuff has to be exposed. It's not knowing what's going on out there in the deep. Those springs aren't just way out there. They're coming back to these rivers. Yukon got no spring salmon this year. Other rivers are suffering, and of course that's why they're wiping them out. But yeah, you don't have to go to jail. I don't like jail either.
No. I don't want to go to jail. I've never even seen a jail cell, and I don't want to go there. But you have to be strategic, right? You have to be very strategic.
Like in my father's time, they had absolutely nothing to say about anything. We kept grinding away, and now we have more to say than the government on our land.
We got a question over here.
Clean di ayahat kagwantan yadi. Take unyik duasa. Great grandchild of Nananya Yadi. You have brought your precious ones, your elders, from far away, but not that far from our hearts. You have come and you have said words that will not fall, words of peace, words of strength. Our peoples have always known and from time immemorial have stood for this balance that we have always had to keep the natural world in order. This is not the first time that we have been through this. As we come together right now, as our neighbors and as our brothers or sisters have come and traveled to this place and on the sacred ground, to say these words, to remember our origins, our originality, to stand strong. The secret is out once again. After the sensitive time on the earth, after the last 2.5 years, after the time that we have spent in our homes with our families, our minds are sharp again. Our spirits and our hearts are strong again. And what is the voice that is coming forward? It is an original voice, a powerful and a strong voice, that we lack nothing, that we are good just the way we are. The animals knew that. Nothing higher and nothing less, equal and together. And as we come together, it is time that we stand in our place. You are right. The world is watching. You are correct. We have this time. We have this place and this space. As we come and we harvest and gather our food, our herring, the fish, the berries, all the things that sustain us, No one can take that away, because if they do, they are attempting to take our spiritual food away, right out of our mouths. We cannot let that happen. There is too much to save right now, too much to go forward with right now. As you have come, and your elders have come to witness, you are not our neighbors, you are the half of us. This is a really sacred time right now in the world. This is a sacred time that we need each other. When I say the secret is back for us to open, it is that we as a people coming together know how to manage this land, know it is correct, do not need permission, because our people have shown for tens of thousands of years already how to do it. It is precedented. We've got that knowledge for this land that others do not have. So it is wise to listen. It is wise to listen with our allies today. It is good of you to come in this way. It is good of you to share these words. As I look at each and every one of my brothers and sisters that are gathered here today, I know they're fighters. I know they're warriors. I know they have strong voices. I know that we're here together, and I know that we will stand strong together. We have those generations that are coming to fill up their bellies. The secret is out. We are powerful. We never, ever lost everything that our ancestors have given us. Somebody tried to tell us a lie. Somebody tried to tell us how to walk. It's not true. We can fish, we can provide, we can gather, we can do these things. We can be that much stronger together. And that's what we're going to do together.
Thank you, you said it better than we did all night.
Tsimshian. You know Tsimshian pretty good? And the reason why I say that is you use the term yes. And the grandmother is a god or this. Okay. I just want to say one thing is this, that I was always taught to have respect for the elders. And I love the elders no matter who you are. And I was always taught that. My grandmother, my dad, as well as myself, my great-grandparents, some met Gitxsan Founders Day, came over to Father Duncan. I was born and raised, grew up in Gakyaals. My great-granddad, all he spoke in the house was Tlingit. These Kiiqawaay people from Sept and born in Fort Thomas. And I was taught between Tsimshian and Tlingit, speaking the language, always spoke in our house. And I tried not to say the wrong words. If I said something wrong, I'd catch help and wonder which side or the other. So anyway, that's why I'm here to ask you what the proper word for grandmother was. I appreciate that. And then the gentleman had the right decision over there as far as you take what you want, but always leave stuff left over. See what I'm saying? There's one thing I don't live by, that's the Upshur rule. See what I'm saying? And I want to thank you folks for, that meant a lot tonight. It hit my heart. And I want to thank everybody here tonight. It's a pleasure to be with you, gentlemen. God bless both of you. Thank you.
He was talking about how when we go out after this, or even before this, how he has no fear. But there are his sisters and his cousins and his family who do, and I myself have that same fear. I'm sure all of us have grown up with the same thing of give respect to the land and our elders telling us to take what we want when we want and when we need it, because that's our land and it belongs to us. But I'm sure there are others also like myself who have that fear of running into authority, running into a lot of people who have power over our areas, and we don't know what to do in those situations, so we don't do anything at all. So what advice do you have to give to us, to those who are afraid, to those who are not as bold or don't want to put up so much of a fight or are afraid of the consequences that might come, even though they shouldn't be there in the first place?
If I answer the question for this young lady, I lived in a time where we were in gunfights about fishing rights. Some of you remember French Landing in Washington. Some remember the occupation of Alcatraz. Some remember the occupation of Fort Lawton in Seattle. The old timers.
Fort Lawton.
Not much older than I am, a couple days or so. But one thing is that we're smart. You know, don't go running into this being a, don't run into this being a dummy. Be smart, think it out. 2, you need to be tough. You know, people are going to, as my nephew says here, they're gonna fight with you. They're gonna treat you bad. And we have been treated bad. Before some of you were even born, we had to learn how to assert our right to be native. Did you know that at the time that I was growing up, we weren't allowed to be native? We weren't allowed to speak our language. This building was something that was funded by the tourist industry. Because they wanted to make something for tourists. But they didn't know what they were really doing. Down in Saxon, they built a thing called the, that guy that invented Alaska. Seward. Yeah. They built see, I'm not very smart, right? But I know that but together we are. So, they built this totem pole. The Seward family complained, says, we don't want to have the guys doing the shame pole, right? Well, the shame pole comes from the government. They build it, they give us money every few years to rebuild the Seward. You got to be smart. You got to be courageous. You got to be united. Now, even though, you know, my Tlingit brothers and sisters, and then my own Tsimsian people, they're always fighting with each other. We're always fighting with each other, but we love each other. We do. And even if, even when we're talking bad about each other, we're always telling these stories to take the edge off. You need to love each other, care about each other. You got to be tough. You really do. That doesn't mean, you know, like, you know, in my generation, we learned how to take a beating to survive. But we also learned how to write grants. You know, the old OEO grants, the old Office of Economic Opportunity grants, the JOM grants. Those were the ones that helped us to bring back the language. We had to fight every single inch of the way. Harriet remember those days. Yeah. I like to tease her and say she's my sister. I don't want to tell people she's my elder. Because she created a path for us by fighting. Even though we weren't able to win, we fought anyway. And we're still fighting. My wife's always said me to sit down and
said you have to be strategic, and it doesn't mean everybody has to go out and get arrested. You can support by teaching others. We need the lawyers to support those who are willing to go out and exercise their rights. We need the youth to go out and talk to the youth, to go talk to your parents, to talk to your grandparents, to talk about our culture, our rights. And so what I'm getting at is we need everybody. We need somebody. When the young fellow here goes out there to exercise his rights, as I said, when we've done it, there's 100 witnesses. They're not there to get arrested. They're there to witness. And they're there with their cameras. And so that when it goes, if it goes to court, they witnessed it.
It's not even that scary anymore. You just heard an eyewitness from the cowboy and Indian days.
If I may, there was this thing that my uncle used to say that I feel like relates to this a little bit. He always used to say, if you can't be good, be quick. And if you're not very quick, be really good at it.
Actually, can I answer where I find my strength from?
Yeah.
Actually, in the room here, I know Doug Modig, he just called me nephew, and I take honor in that. But Richard Peterson, I know as Uncle Rick, and Guujaaw, I know has led in fights with my awa, my mother. So in just this room, and then these two ladies next to me on my right, Yakdushi and Kiiqawaay, they're Tlingit and I'm Haida, but I find strength when I'm around them. You find your own strength, and I'm not blood related to any of those folks that I just named. But I found them, and when I do act and I do those things from our people, our ancestors, I'm not afraid because they're smart. My Uncle Rick, he's a genius. My sisters, they know how to protect me when I'm scared. They speak Tlingit in a way that I don't know how to speak Gakyaals yet, and that gives me strength. And I see a chief, a hereditary chief from the High Chief Council and the Haida Nation, and it gives me strength. But sometimes you have to realize there's a whole generation looking up at you too right now, even though you're young yourself. And then you gotta make sure that you teach them, because even though you feel like you're still the student, we were always teaching as well as we learn. So you just gotta have the strength within yourself and build your own family if you don't have one.
I am not a fluent speaker, so forgive me if I pronounce anything wrong. Bushkika yuhadu asal luknahadi dachan dekina ayachat. I am a grandchild of the Luknahadi. My grandfather was Luknahadi, and he was from the Kiiqawaay house, and his Tlingit name was Satan, voice of the sea lion. My grandmother was Haida, and she was Raven, Gitxsan, double-fin killer whale. So I am of both the Tlingit and the Haida nations. And I am honored to be on the organizing committee of the Sharing Our Knowledge Conference. And I am honored to be able to sit in on sessions like this. It's extra honored because I'm one of the fortunate ones to have a little one during COVID. So I have free time. You might have met Lola last night handing out masks. She was great at distributing masks, not good at being quiet. And a few things that I have learned being a mother is that teaching her to be Tlingit or Haida or our indigenous ways is not about the color of her skin or her eyes or her hair or really her blood quantum or even the fact of her race. It is a way of life. And that I have the honor and privilege to teach her, for instance, on my birthday, we went out and went berry picking. Seems simple, but it's something that I have very fond memories of doing with my grandparents. They would stick me on a rock and tell me to sing loud. And they would go and I would harvest with them, but I would go fishing with them. I learned to smoke salmon. I learned to can salmon. And while so many of our conversations right now are talking about very important, serious issues like what's happening to our salmon, what's happening to our herring, the rights that we have as Indigenous people, the fight that we've had to do, the generational trauma we've had to sustain, and the fatigue from fighting that we've had from generations of oppression and marginalization. Those are they're very important, and they carry a lot of weight with them. But we are also people that carry a lot of strength and love and courage, and we have the opportunity to teach lighter things to our next generation. So while we are carrying the burden of 250 to 300 years of oppression in our current generation, we don't have to continue to pass that generational trauma onto the next generation. They don't have to carry the burden and the weight of that. We can teach them the ways of our people, regardless of their color of skin, regardless of their eye color, their hair color, or what their BIA card says. Whether they are of European descent or Tlingit and Haida Tsimshian, if they're living here in Giindajin or Tsimshian land or Haida land, we have the privilege of teaching these young people our ways, which goes far beyond our skin color and far beyond our BIA cards or First Nation authority. And it goes far beyond our oppression. And so for me, that was a new thing that I've been able to discover in the last 2 years, because Lola at 2.5 is not going to understand how our rights were taken away from us and how we have to fight for our rights or what's happening to our fish. But she understands going in the woods and picking berries with me. She understands Hagu. She understands Gunashtish, Hawa. She understands that this is not a chicken house. That is Chief Shakes' tribal house. She thought for a minute it was a chicken shed. Asked where the birds were. And so as I'm transitioning into this new role in my life, and I was a stepmom beforehand, I have an opportunity to step back and realize that while I do carry the weight and the burden, and it is my responsibility to teach people our history because it's important, I find a greater responsibility in teaching her our way of life and our stewardship of the land, and teaching her courage, and teaching her strength, and teaching her stewardship, and teaching her respect, and teaching her love. Because the oppression will come, the history will come, the fight in political realms will come. But maybe if we reframed our conversations and stop trying to fight this uphill battle and invested our energy and our strength into things that filled up our cup as well, like every single young person that lives in our community, then maybe our message in 50 years, our way of life will still be here. And maybe our language will still be here. And maybe we'll have the opportunity to teach future generations, and it will go out to be a global phenomenon, because the world is just now starting to realize, wait a minute, the Indigenous culture, they maybe had that right in the first place, and we got it wrong. And so my new focus is youth, and my new focus is mindset. And so it is our great privilege to be able to sit in and have these beautiful places of community where we can bring in elders and people that are not quite elders and people that are my age and even the youth, and bring them into community with one another to celebrate our cultural way of life and teach them the ways of the land. And so tomorrow night we will be having a youth night, and it will be the first youth night that we have ever had in our sharing of our knowledge plan conferences. And we have brought in youth speakers, sitting behind me, Chris Bryant, Tsimshian from Metlakatla. He will be the youth speaker, and I'm going to just give him a quick opportunity to say something after me, as well as the Outer Coast team of 15 that is helping with our conference, making it possible. Thank you so much for your time. Chief Shakes Longhouse.